Speaking of clickbait, church, right? They make so much money. Tell us about it, Dip.
Church. That's not what I'm talking about.
Talking about banking.
What are you talking about?
I thought Royal Commission had to do with the
Yeah, well, obviously
No.
there's
Last time it
there's
did.
been a royal commission, a couple of royal commissions.
I did not read the story. if you couldn't tell.
There's been one on institutional responses to child sexual
Okay,
abuse.
forget what I said about church.
Yeah. But this is one on the Royal Commission into the banking, superannuation, insurance. I forget the full title, but essentially like the finance sector.
I knew a guy named Ben King.
Good. So the reason we're talking about this is because on Monday they had their first hearing. So
Right.
this was announced last year, November-ish, end of last year. And it was interesting that Malcolm Turnbull announced it, and he used the word regrettable. His tone was very interesting. So the backstory to it is there's been a lot of political pressure from the other parties, Greens, Labor, to kind of have a royal commission into banking sector because there's been a series of bad behaviour, misconduct.
Yeah.
That's below the term is they say misconduct below the community's expectation.
Nobody
What's
trusts the
happened?
banks.
Is it the manipulation of the rates and stuff like that?
Multiple things. There's been, even money laundering, rigging kind of interest rates and currency markets, denying or slowing down, legitimate kind of insurance claims by customers. Essentially, really having a culture that is profits over people. But we can get back into that and kind of having conflicts of interest where they channel the funds of their customers into their own products, and then the people who do that, get incentives, etc.
So they're banks.
They're banks, essentially.
Got him.
Burn.
Bank
burn.
So the reason this came about was because the National Party, who have a coalition with the Liberal government,
Naturally.
were having a pressure for them to do it, and Barnaby Joyce and someone else, I can't remember the name, was it John Alexander, something like that, were having by-elections because of the whole dual citizenship scandal that's going
classic
on.
Yeah.
scandal.
So the Turnbull government needed to do
Because they were
something.
bloody foreigners.
And because there's been so much kind of stories of malpractice, there's a lot of public mistrust with the banks and the finance sector at the moment.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that Turnbull did this because he even before he did it, he got approval from the banks to say we're going to do, go ahead for the Royal Commission.
Got approval.
They're coming
That's not
for
a
you.
good look.
Well, they wrote
Is it
to
okay
him
if we
essentially saying
investigate
it's regrettable, but we want you to do it. His tone was a bit weird. It's funny because obviously the banks, the biggest industry in Australia,
Whoa.
employ over
Yeah.
250,000 people. Estimated last year that their profit, the four big banks, up till September was $37 billion.
Shivers.
Someone should invest.
They reckon, this is interesting, right? This estimated that they have a $4.6 trillion in assets, which is 2.5 times greater than the Australian economy.
That's a lot.
But that's imagine every single house that owes money to a bank.
Yeah.
That's an asset.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Oh, right.
Add it all up.
Add it all up.
Wouldn't that just be every house in Australia, or is that what you're saying?
Well, some
Pretty
people
much.
have paid off their houses.
Right.
But every deposit that's in there, every
Car loan, personal loans.
if a highway project borrows money from a bank, that's an asset.
That's an asset for them.
Jeez.
So they got a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
But the banks obviously are political donors as well. So they estimated to give about 2.69 million, I think, to the political parties, both Labor and Liberal, the two
Right.
main parties.
But Labor was for this.
They were.
Right.
63% of that would go to Liberal. And maybe that's a question of they're in power, or maybe it's a question of, it's traditional lines, party lines of what they value. So obviously, but before this, so also there was estimated that for the last 5 years that the banks and finance sector have paid out $32 million in civil penalties. So public don't trust the banks at the moment.
Civil, that means when they've broken the law.
Yeah, but not
When has
criminal.
the public ever trusted a bank?
It's true. I don't.
Since the 2008 financial crisis, it's basically been
But their line is, we can't have too much competition because we need to keep the economy stable. We kept the economy stable because of our, banking sector. I'm not totally across it because I don't work in this area. But it would also be a question that we probably were kept safe because of our minerals and our resources, opposed to anything else, really. But, someone will tell me I'm wrong there. And I probably am. But the problem is with this kind of Royal Commission, so the terms of reference are very narrow. They've included the industry, what's it called? The superannuation funds. What's it? The industry ones, that is?
Industry super funds.
Yeah, industry super funds. And they're kind of scratching their heads why they're included, because it's more of a union kind of thing rather than the finance banking sector.
So
Right.
you might have said this already, but
Yeah.
what is the ultimate purpose of doing this?
It's to kind of come out with, he's the commissioner, who is Kenneth Hayne, who is a previous High Court judge, very
Nice.
well respected, has to produce a report by the end of 1 year, essentially saying what the problems are, what my recommendations are, and then that can be used by government to form legislation that will hopefully improve the banking sector.
So this guy
Yeah.
has got a lot of power with what he's going to write.
He does. But the problem is he has a short deadline. He has 1 year.
Is it soon?
Oh, that's very short.
Very short. Considering the one into institutional child's response to child sex abuse was 5 years.
Jeez.
The one into the trade union was 18 months. It seems kind of disproportional.
Yeah.
Considering the people who have been hurt by this and the amount of money that these banks have, because the banks, they're not lying down for this. They've hired the best lawyers you can. They've got multiple in-house lawyers in their banks, and they've set up what they've called war rooms, where they're in their companies. They have a live feed of the tribunal, whatever, the Royal Commission, and then they have pretty much unlimited resources to do what they want.
Right.
Jeez.
So they can make this very difficult. So he came out pretty strong last year and said, we want by sometime in late January, we want a report from all the banks about the misconduct cases. 50-page report, no more, no less. Do this. They've all come back, I think, and delayed, so we can't do it, which is probably not the case.
Yeah.
And he addressed that in the first thing, and his tone was very ominous. So he's saying, if you keep doing this, we're going to drag it out. But I think there's also a year because the government wants this done before the election, their election deadline. So again, they can use it as some kind of PR. Look at us fixing.
So they're kind of attacking Labor through the industry super funds.
Yep.
And they're protecting. So they're the ones who passed this because they were at risk of
looking bad, I guess, because people know they're in bed with the banks, right?
Well, they're also at risk of the other parties just banding together and passing it.
Yeah.
Because people, Liberal government members were going to
cross the bench.
Yeah, we're going to cross the bench to pass opposition legislation.
So it looks like they're doing something, but in truth, the scope's too
limited
narrow, the deadlines are too short.
Yeah.
And
which is exactly what Turnbull would have told the banks when he was like, we're going to do this, but we're going to do it in a way that's most suitable to us because it's going to happen anyway.
So is it a big circle jerk that's not going to accomplish anything?
Hopefully it will, but I'm not optimistic.
We've got pretty good powers in our royal commissions, right?
Yeah.
Like, the guy who's in charge of it, is he legit?
Yeah, all the commentary about him is he's well respected.
Yeah.
Won't sit down, will take... Yeah. He's a fantastic...
So he'll know what the government's angle is.
Yeah, I think so.
Hopefully he won't care.
Yeah. Who does he bank with?
Good question.
He's all in Bitcoin.
Hopefully. Has digital currency got anything to do with this? Probably not.
I don't think it's... No, I don't think they'll talk about it. I don't...
Good.
Leave the Bitcoin out of it.
Yeah.
So we can use it more in the future.
Yeah.
Slightly more.
Fingers crossed this actually achieves something, because I think the public are probably fed up with the super profits that these banks create in the finance sector.
Maybe they should get a super tax.
Yeah.
I like the sound.
But the question is, like, when they talk about profit over people, right? But isn't that a bank's outcome? Isn't their goal and business private sector to make profits?
To help people.
Responsibility is to their shareholders.
Not to their customers.
That's what they would say.
So what can we, like, what do Australians change their bank?
Their customers only to the extent of their shareholders.
Their shareholders.
No, we're actually really bad at changing our banks. I still bank with Commonwealth Bank because of Dolomites.
I
literally never went to anyone else.
But the only reason I maybe change is home loan stuff.
Yeah,
I think that's when you think about it.
But once you're locked in, as if you can
refinance.
You can, but
Yeah.
do people?
I don't know.
The point is they generally don't, because they came out with a study that said that banks charge their long-term customers way higher interest rates than new customers. So they actually don't reward people for staying. But the only reason you would do that is because people stay.
Yep.
The only reason you can charge them more is
because people stay. Yeah. Because people probably find it a hassle.
Yeah.
So maybe that's an attitude that needs to shift in the Australian public.
Yeah, maybe we need to shop around.
Yeah.
Risk someone outside of the big four.
Ooh.
Would you bank with someone who wasn't St. George, Westpac, NAB or CBA?
ING?
If they gave me...
Did you say ANZ?
Yeah.
Yep. Well,
that's the big four. So ANZ, Westpac, NAB and Commonwealth Bank.
I'd go ANZ in a second to get Apple Pay.
Go ING, they have Apple Pay.
ING got it.
Oh.
But the question would be, I think it comes down, if you get a better rate and you're paying for a home loan, which is something quite significant, then I think people would think about it.
Nice.
Yeah.
But just everyday banking, probably not, right?
What else you got?
Okay, so we're also talking about another study that came out this week from Western Australia, which was looking at kind of cognitive functioning in juvenile detention centres. So this kind of gathered a lot of media attention this week. It's quite interesting. It was the first Australian study to look at this in a Banksia Hill WA detention centre, which is the only detention centre, juvenile detention centre in Western Australia. So they did like a survey, cross-sectional kind of study looking at the young people in there and their kind of cognitive functioning, which there's kind of 9 kind of areas of cognitive functioning. So kind of memory, language, attention, your adaptive functioning, your executive functioning, which is like the high level of decision making and understanding consequences and stuff like that. And what they found was that like 9 out of 10, so 90% of the people they surveyed, which was 99 people, have some form of cognitive functioning problem. And
what's that compared to normal and not juvenile
good
detention people?
Good question. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't look at the baseline.
But probably way less, right?
Yeah. So, and then also the main study that they published was about fetal alcohol syndrome. And talking about that 1 in 3 of these patients had this, of these juvenile detention young people have some fetal alcohol syndrome.
Crazy.
And
insane.
It's pretty huge. And there's been some Canadian studies that have done similar and found 11 to 23%, right?
Yeah.
And it's usually, most of this stuff is usually undiagnosed. So this is the first time it's been flagged.
Yeah. I thought it was 90% in the
That's
study.
cognitive function, fetal alcohol syndrome.
Right, okay.
So, but they couldn't get all data from every patient because maybe they can't get contact with the mother or the people who are taking care of it. So it's a complex thing. There's standardized tests to do.
Well, are they diagnosing purely on the basis of the patient, or do they need a history?
No, they do history.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it makes it complicated. I think it's only a small sample size. So this isn't really
something they can do.
It's like 36
for
people.
Everyone then.
No, probably not. There were people they couldn't get any data on.
Right.
It's interesting to note that. I think this is not interesting, but probably appalling, that 74% of the people in there were Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander.
Far out.
And what? The Australian population is maybe 3%?
3%.
2.9.
So the overrepresentation here is just huge. And I think the implications are, for a lot of people, this is the first time this problem's been flagged, identified. And if you obviously have some kind of cognitive functioning difficulty or this fetal alcohol syndrome problem, how are you going to respond in the judicial system, right? How are you going to have the capacity to give evidence or, appear before a court?
So is it saying that they have that because of the detention centre? Or?
No. Not the fetal alcohol syndrome.
Right.
It's a bit difficult to say about the cognitive functioning. It's maybe a bit of both.
Yeah. It's hard to work out between correlation and causation in this case, right? Because it could, obviously if you're in a family where the mother was drinking while you were pregnant, while they were pregnant, that's a very, it's going to skew you towards lower income, low education.
So
which always has these health outcomes, right? Which are always going to have
those kinds of, that's always been the skew in youth detention. So it's sort of a chicken and the egg thing. Do they end up in youth detention because they have these cognitive function disabilities, or because they grew up in an environment where someone was likely to drink when they were pregnant?
Right. Whoa. So I guess, are they trying to figure out, should they be tried different if they are affected? Like
Everyone should probably be assessed for this kind of these conditions, this cognitive functioning problems,
right?
Because then that would obviously influence how. Well, hopefully, I'm not. We don't work in that area, but how the judicial system would work for these kinds of young people.
What's the range of effects that this causes? The fetal alcohol syndrome, anyway.
I couldn't tell you.
Right.
Yeah.
But could it cause someone to be more violent or just not
understand
how to?
Yeah, definitely problems understanding.
Deal with things.
Yeah. So it's and like even if you go further, like these things have probably happened, particularly because there's a high population of Aboriginal people because of what has happened to those families, stolen generations,
It's just
years
another link in
of
the
kind
chain.
of oppression and institutional abuse.
Yeah.
It's funny that these policies that happened not so long ago, and when you talk to people who are alive today and this happened to their families, it's shocking that it has this effect down the line in their generations. Like these kids who just young people like you and I end up in this kind of this cycle and this. What are the outcomes going to be? What kind of rehabilitation hope are these for these young kids?
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see this kind of study done everywhere, especially other.
There's
Western
only been
Australia
a
has
couple.
quite a large population of
Aboriginal
and Torres Strait Islanders.
Yep.
Like New South Wales, Victoria. That would be interesting to see, right?
It'd be interesting to see. It's probably still kind of the same level of overrepresentation, I would think, in the systems.
Yeah.
I think that would probably be similar across the board, but yeah, I don't know. So that's just food for thought.
Nice.
Yeah.
Anything else on that one?
No. All good.
Makes you think though about the whole
does.
punishment thing.
Yeah.
Like, let's not just be punishing as if that fixes everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
Jail doesn't work, right?
Didn't work. It worked on Chris though.
Yeah. Speaking of Chris,
We didn't like
Chris,
Black
we're already
Panther,
over an
so-
hour, so you're in an express section.
You want to hear about Bitcoins or China?
Which one do you like more?
Yeah. What do you like?
Which one do you know more about?
I know equally little on both.